Middle-aged and mediocre wants to know, when you were first starting out in Houston, when did you first start pitching out booking ideas? What was your first idea that you had that you remember being used?
So it wasn't so much in Houston, especially in the early years when I started working during the summers from the time I was 16 years old. I would be able to sit with Bronco Lubitsch and Gary Hart, mainly Gary. And that would be before the shows or, during the day. Paul would leave, they would kind of hang back and they would ask me questions, or I would ask questions about, hey, what do you got? What are you guys doing in Dallas? That's different than what we're doing here. And I was more, I was listening a lot more than anything. I think that I couldn't even tell you the first time that I said, "Hey, what if we did this?" Um, I remember bad ideas that I wouldn't even get into. I suggested to Chavo Guerrero, and he thought was one of the worst, most horrible ideas he'd ever heard in his life. And then 2 weeks later, did it with somebody else. So there, yeah, that's a hard one. But my early years, it wasn't so much, hey, what if we did this? It was, why are we doing this? So that I can understand the psychology of what makes you think, going here is going to take us, and then where are we going after that? What's that next beat? So those were the formative years. By the time that I got to sit in meetings with Watts and Ken Mantell and people like that, then that was where I could suggest ideas and how about Butch Reed and Junkyard Dog, things of that nature, and Dog is gone. Let's push Duggan. So it was the early years, man. I was more learning, and I dare say that even today, it's about, why'd you do that? Why would you do that? What's the thought process, or why? I would love to go back when I came up with Vince and say, what was the thought process behind Hogan Andre? Well, everybody thinks, oh, it's simple. It's the biggest match you have in the book. Sure it is. That's easy to say. You just put this guy against this guy. God, and it's made. Okay, great. How do you get there? What do you do? And what's next? And those answers all have to make sense before you just go, oh, it's so easy. This one versus this one. It's there. They're undefeated. They should face each other. Okay. Then what? Because if they're both undefeated, you're going to have a match. You want a winner, right? Who is it? What does that do to the other person? Is it better to keep them apart for a little bit longer? Build even more? And then once you get there, now you give me a story to get there versus, oh, well, they just both happen to be undefeated. And a lot of times, armchair bookers and armchair quarterbacks will want to, just say, they should have done this. Okay, then what? Help me out here. What would you do now? And that's what goes into the process. It's not just, hey, man, you want a WrestleMania level television show every week? Sure. You're going to get sick of it. And then WrestleMania doesn't mean shit. Every live event, they don't mean shit because you're giving it to them all on TV. And then after everybody wants the blow off. Well, after you do the blow off, then what? Then tell me what's next, because we need to know what's next. It's great to say, I got this idea. It takes you to here. Okay, great. Then what? And that's the part that I think people really don't understand. So in my time of pitching, I don't know that really young until I started working with Watson, Ken Mantell, Ernie Ladd. And JR was responsible for a lot of that. JR was responsible for saying, hey, this is a young kid that really loves the business, and, let's use it. Jim put me on TV doing interviews and things like that. So I owe a lot of gratitude to Jim Ross for that, because he, put me in those meetings. Sometimes keep your mouth shut, kid. Okay. But you learn, and you learn a lot more asking questions than being the smartest guy in the room saying, oh, well, you should do this or you should do that. Instead, understand why you're going to do the things you're going to do and where you're going to go from there. It's important to listen and learn.
Is there a point of pride? I mean, I know you've told me before, hey, one of the first things I produced as far as like a full show was the Slammings. But is there an angle in particular you remember seeing on TV or seeing executed and being sort of proud to say, oh, I did that? I know it's old hat at this point, but the first one, does that ring a bell? Do you recall what it was?
Well, I mean, my first show that I was given was Primetime, and I got all the cable shows. All American, man, it wrote itself. That was Gene Okerlund being Gene Okerlund. Spotlight, that was Ins and Outs. Primetime was Bobby and Gorilla, who I was an outsider coming in. That, who's this kid?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll do it. We'll get to it. But I knew I was going to get that reaction because I was a 24-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And I also knew that if I could just get in the car with them, travel with them a little bit, pick their brains, find out what makes them tick. I kind of knew Bobby from before, not real well, but a little bit, but I didn't know Monsoon at all. And I just took the opportunity, every opportunity I had to ride with them and to be around them and talk to them. And we built up that trust. And they went to bat for me with the other folks that were still looking at me like that 24-year-old kid that came from Houston is trying to take everybody's job. So the one, I mean, that was probably the biggest thing was being able to do Primetime and have a free reign with that. God, I can't even think. It's because it kind of runs together after a while of what, what you did and why and everything else.
Sure.